not being able to join us live, we are delighted to welcome you to our Tefillah Workshop, our Tuesday Tefillah Workshop. And we are delighted to share with you this afternoon a very well-known prayer, and that is the last prayer of our service on mornings, afternoons, and evenings, the Aleinu. But before we get to that, we are going to begin the way that we always begin, with an opening song, an opening tefillah, Ivdu et Hashem, B'simcha bo lefanav birnana. So go ahead and mute yourself. And Cantor Rafi is going to lead us in the singing of Ivdu et Hashem if she comes back. And if she doesn't come back, it's going to be me. But we'll give her 1 minute to come back. Oh, fortunately she did.
You know, I have this confession, but Rabbi Cameron knows I'm really terrible with memorizing. So I often look at sheet music, even if I've sung something 500 times, it just gives me a lot of comfort. So I always forget to bring the sheet music for Ivdu et Hashem, but I can't find it. So I'm going to go from memory, and I know the content, so hopefully we're going to get it right. And if I don't, it's okay. Ivdu et Hashem besimcha, Ivdu et Hashem besimcha, bo lefanav birnana, lefanav birnana. Ivdu et Hashem besimcha, Ivdu et Hashem besimcha, bo lefanav birnana, lefanav birnana. Yalalai, 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 lai, lai, yalalai, yalalai, lai, yalalai, 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 lai, lai, yalalai, yalalai, lai, yalalai. Yalalai, yalalai, lai, lai, yalalai, lai, 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 yalalai, 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 lai, lai, yalalai, yalalai, lai. Ivdu et Hashem besimcha, Ivdu et Hashem besimcha, bo lefanav birnana, lefanav birnana. Ivdu et Hashem besimcha, Ivdu et Hashem besimcha, bo lefanav birnana, lefanav birnana.
That was okay. I mean, it was not as good as if you had the sheet music with you, but we will give you a pass today for not having it with you.
Thank you.
Does she hold herself to high standards? Okay, let's recite our bracha for learning together. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Okay, I want to do something different. Jackie, do you have the Aleinu with you to share? Is it easily accessible?
Yes, in like 20 seconds I'll have it.
Okay, so what I want us to do is, we know the prayer so well, and I'm guessing that most of us, if not all of us, know a good portion of it, if not all of it, by heart. But knowing something by heart doesn't necessarily mean that we understand what it is that we're saying. So if I was just to ask you quickly, without looking at it, what is the central theme of Aleinu? Right? And don't look at it, everybody. Don't like grab a copy of it if you don't have it in front of you. Leave it that way. But just like one sentence, what's the theme of Aleinu?
To praise God.
Okay, good. Aleinu l'shabeach. You're taking literally the first two words. Aleinu l'shabeach. It is incumbent upon us to praise God. Very good. Anything else?
Yeah, we're grateful to be, choosing us.
Okay, good. So there's this idea of chosenness in the Aleinu, that we're grateful that God chose us to be God's people. Anything else? All right, so let's do this. So what I want you to do is, I want you to take a minute or two, read the Aleinu prayer, and then come back and tell me if you had to make a single thesis sentence about the first paragraph and the second paragraph, because they're different. They don't say the same thing. What would you say the essence of this tefillah is all about? And then I'm going to talk to us about the historical understanding of this prayer, and then relate it to, a few other things. So take a look at it and just read it and tell me what is the thesis statement. Go ahead. Okay, so are we done yet or not yet?
Done.
Done.
So what's it about?
God is everywhere.
One God.
Okay,
And there's one God.
very good. Okay, so there's definitely this idea of God is everywhere, or God is everything. It depends on how we understand Ein Od. The mystical version of Ein Od is that everything is God. It's not that there is no end to God, that all there is God. But whether we understand it that way or understand it as simply as God's unity. And what was the other thing you said, Barry?
The oneness of God.
Okay, the oneness of God. Anybody else? Just jump in, because I can't see all of you at the same time because we're sharing a screen. So call out. What other underlying message does this prayer have for us?
God created everything.
Okay, good. That everything in this world is subsumed under God.
God.
God is the creator of all things.
Okay, I'm looking at Lifnei Melech Malchei Hamlachim. So if he is the king of all kings, he is the God of all gods.
Good. Okay, excellent. Anybody else?
Praise for God.
Great.
So, the first paragraph, we thank God for choosing us. In the second paragraph, we're saying how, there's not enough words to describe how great God is. So that kind of even amplifies the uniqueness and the specialness of God picking us, picking us over the other.
Very good. Okay, and that's the way that Ziggy just articulated is really the classical way in which the sages and commentaries understand the Aleinu. The first paragraph, Aleinu l'shabeach, is classic Jewish doctrine that says that God particularly chose the Jewish people, that our relationship with God is, a unique relationship with God. And the second paragraph that begins Alkein Nekavecha is an eschatological vision, a vision of a future time where we contemplate God's glory and the world will be perfected under the kingdom of God. In other words, every human being will come to the inevitable recognition of the one true God. That's what the second paragraph states. So this passage ends, this prayer ends every prayer service. The question is, why? Why does it end every service? Why is it important that we are reminded of God's unity and of the ultimate goal of eradicating idolatry and making sure that everybody praises God and everybody believes in the one God? Let's leave that for a minute unless somebody wants to jump in and have a quick answer to that question.
Summarizes the whole service.
Good. Okay. In a sense, I've said to you in the past that the prayer book is for the rabbis, their opportunity to do theology. And what they want to do is they want to make sure we leave our prayer services with an understanding of the whole reason why we prayed in the beginning. So that when we walk into our day, after the morning service, after the afternoon service, or in the evening before we go to bed, we contemplate the unity of God and the particular mission of the Jewish people, which is to be witness to that singular, unified notion of God, and that all of the other prayers can be subsumed under this one prayer. Great. Okay, now let's dig a little bit deeper, and let's look at the first the history of this prayer, because unlike many of the prayers in the Siddur, this prayer has an ancient history. In fact, our rabbis teach us who was the original author of this prayer. This is the $100,000 question. This is the question that gives you the right to, I don't know, the right to
Teach the next Tefillah workshop.
teach. Yes. Well, no, nobody's going to answer that question, Jackie. So the rabbis say that the person who wrote this was Joshua. And he wrote this after the victory over the city of Jericho, when the walls of Jericho came tumbling down. And they actually attribute certain verses in the paragraphs to his name. So if you go down, you can find a line of the prayer that begins with the Yud, a line that begins with the Hey, with the Vav, with the Shin, with the Ayin. His entire name is written out in this Aleinu, in these two paragraphs. But we know historically that's probably not the origin of the prayer. Most likely it was written by Rav, one of the great rabbis of the 3rd century of Babylonia. That he was the one who articulated this eschatological prayer, a prayer of a vision of a future where everybody would come to know what the Jewish people were fortunate enough to know. And what do the Jewish people know? The very lesson that Avraham Avinu taught us. And what's the lesson that Avraham Avinu taught us? There is only one God, right? If you were preschool children, we'd be singing right now. There is only one God, there is only one God. So Rav writes this prayer as an articulation of that. And it ends up, right, as part of the liturgy of the high holidays, specifically Rosh Hashanah. That is the first place that this prayer appears, in that eventually the liturgy of the high holidays, and only much later, hundreds of years later, in fact, probably not until the Middle Ages, and maybe not even until the 13th century, does this prayer enter into the Siddur the way that we have it today. What I want to do with you is I want to take a look at the prayer from the perspective of the high holidays and why it was written for Rosh Hashanah and then Yom Kippur. But before I do that, I want to make sure that we understand a couple elements of the prayer. As I mentioned already, the first paragraph of the prayer speaks about the particularist idea that the Jewish people know and understand that there is one God, and we are therefore commanded, it is incumbent upon us to praise this one God. The second idea of the prayer in the second paragraph is more of a universal theme, that the world shall come to know, that all humanity shall come to know, that the wicked shall return, and not just the Jews, but everyone will come to know God. So the question is, what does it mean? What does it mean for the world? What does it mean for the Jews to understand that there is only one God? It means a couple of things. First, it means that the world in which we live is the domain of God. What does it mean for us to say that the world in which we live is the domain of God? It's God's domain, not our domain. What does that mean first?
We have a responsibility to God, not to ourselves, but to God, to maintain the values that God has bestowed upon us.
Good, good. If you lend your car to somebody, if you lend your house to somebody, you expect that they're going to take care of it and be responsible for it. So God has lent us. God has given over the domain of this world, which is his world, to all of us, with the expectation that we are going to care for it and everything that is in it. How do we as Jews do that? We do it through the Torah. And when we do it through the Torah, we become models for other people in the hope that people will see what it is that we are doing and be so moved to do the same, that they will recognize the wisdom that we bring to caring for God's world and want to emulate us. Right? That's the first message here in the Torah in this prayer, when we speak about this idea of what does it mean that God is sovereign, right? That God is, that the world that we live in is God's domain. What's another possibility? This idea of Lifnei Melech Malchei Hamlachim Hakadosh Baruch Hu, that God is the King of all kings, the Holy One, blessed be He. What does it mean to make God sovereign in your life, right? It's another way of asking the same question that I asked earlier. Personally, what does it mean for you to make God sovereign in your life? When you think of sovereign, what word comes to mind besides king? What is it? What does the relationship of a sovereign imply?
Supreme.
I know that's the problem. We don't live in a kingdom anymore.
That the
But if
people
we
are
were-
people are taken care of by the king.
Okay, good. So on the one hand, there's this sense that God cares for us, watches over us, as any ruler would to his or her constituents. And in return, what do we give back to the king?
Love.
Honor.
Loyalty.
Yeah, our loyalty. The king, the sovereign, is the source of authority. The king, the sovereign, is the acknowledgement that there are consequences to our actions, that if we do what it is that we are instructed to do, we will be taken care of, we will be cared for, we will be loved. And if we don't do what we are supposed to do, there are consequences to our actions. That's what it means to hold God as sovereign in our life, that we are not the ultimate deciders of our authority, that there is a source outside of us. In the same way that that's the focus of what the Shema is trying to do. The Shema, when we recite those 6 words, is an attempt to say that we accept upon ourselves the dominion of God, the authority of God's rule in our life. So we say it at the Shema, and we conclude our service in the same way by repeating it through the Aleinu. Why is this prayer recited specifically on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? What is the primary theme of Rosh Hashanah? God's kingship. Where does this prayer appear in the Rosh Hashanah liturgy? Anybody know?
Shofar service?
kind of. I mean, it's interesting that you say that, Kevin, because the shofar service is quite literally the blowing of the shofar at the end of the Torah service. However, because we want to make sure that we blow the shofar 100 times, the rabbis have instituted that we blow the shofar during the silent Amidah in the Musaf service and during the repetition of the Musaf service. And there are 3 sections of the Musaf service on Rosh Hashanah that are unique to any Musaf service. There's 3 additions. Anybody know what those 3 additions are called? Malchuyot, Shofarot, and Zichronot. So Kevin, you were close when you said what you said. Those 3 additions to the Musaf service are a series of passages, quotes from the Bible that emphasize God's distinct quality or some quality or characteristic of the Rosh Hashanah day liturgy. So we have God as king in Malchuyot, Shofarot, that God pronounces and blows the shofar, and the shofar is that instrument that acknowledges the kingship, the coronation of God as king on Rosh Hashanah. And Zichronot is that God, out of God's kindness and grace, remembers us for the new year. And this prayer, the Aleinu, is the opening prayer of the Malchuyot section of the Musaf service. It's the introduction to that whole service that we call the Malchuyot service of Musaf. That's where it first appears in the Torah. But also, it has to, I think, have elements of tshuva, which are essential to what Rosh Hashanah is all about. And I want us to look at that specifically. There are 3 verses in the Aleinu prayer that come from our Bible. The first one is, and take a look at it carefully, see if you can see it. V'yadata hayom v'hashevota el levavecha ki Adonai hua Elohim b'shamayim mima'al v'ha'al haaretz mitachat ein od. Does everybody see that line? So that line of the prayer, it comes from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 4, verse 39. And what does it mean? It means that know this day and set it in your heart that the Lord is God in heaven above and on earth, ein od, there is no other. So that's the first verse that the rabbis pick up out of the Torah and stick it into this prayer. The second verse that the rabbis take from the Torah is from Exodus chapter 15, verse 18. Adonai imloch leolam va'ed. The Lord shall reign forever and ever. Thank you, Jackie, for highlighting. The Lord shall reign forever and ever. And the third verse comes from the book of Zechariah, the prophet Zechariah, chapter 14, verse 9. V'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz, bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad, u'shemo echad. And the Lord shall be king over the earth, and on that day the Lord shall be one, and his name one. So those are the 3 verses. Now, it's interesting, if you were to go into the Tanakh, if you open up the Torah and the Tanakh and you take a look at the context of Deuteronomy chapter 4, Exodus chapter 15, and Zechariah chapter 14, what might you find? I'm going to guess that some of you may know automatically what chapter 15 of Exodus is. Does anybody know? Adonai imloch leolam va'ed, where that comes from? It's a very famous passage in the Torah in Exodus. Not only does it appear in Aleinu, but it also appears in the end of the Psukei de Zimra section of the service.
Yeah, the song of parting of the sea.
Exactly. It's part of the Song of the Sea. So that should give you a hint at what these 3 verses from the Torah have in common. They are all expressions or statements that are given in the context of God as a warrior God, God who has become victorious over God's enemies. In Deuteronomy, it's a reminder of what God did to the Egyptians when the Israelites left Egypt. In Exodus chapter 15, it's what God just did to the Egyptians when he drowned them in the Sea of Reeds. And for Zechariah, it's a reminder of the way that God has continuously responded to the suffering of the Jewish people and has been victorious over the Jewish people's enemies. So you have 3 verses that are the bulk of the Aleinu, and everything else around the Aleinu is written around those 3 verses. And those 3 verses specifically speak to the fact that God is the warrior God, victorious over our enemies. But in the Aleinu prayer itself, you'll notice there is no mention of any battle over enemies of the Jewish people. The only battle that's going on in the Aleinu, I think, is the internal battle. Not a battle over external enemies, but a battle over internal enemies. No longer are we concerned in the Aleinu about the destruction of the wicked. We are concerned with the destruction of wickedness that is within each one of us. The battle isn't between God and wicked people, but between God and the idolatry that is within the hearts of God's people, within the hearts of each one of us. The idea of Aleinu having front and center its place in the high holiday liturgy and then taken into the Siddur is to remind us that our daily life is a battle between what we know we should be doing and what we tend to do because we're overcome by our Yetzer Hara, by the evil inclination, by all of those strong desires in us. And the whole of Tefillot in general, the whole purpose of prayer is to remind us of the kind of people that we want to be, that we want to mirror God. Just as God is victorious over the enemies of the Jewish people, so too should we be victorious over the enemies that rage inside of each one of us. And when we leave the comfort of our prayer service, where it's so much easier to manage our Yetzer Hara, sitting in synagogue, being with people, removing ourselves from the daily grind. Now, when we're about to leave that place, we need to be reminded yet again of the strong power of the Yetzer Hara. Have any of you ever noticed at the end of a Shabbat service, you may not remember this because it's been a while since you've come to synagogue, but there's oftentimes a rush for the Kiddush table, or there's a rush to put your tallis down at a seat so that you can make sure you can have your space with your friends, right? That's your Yetzer Hara speaking. That's the Yetzer Hara that's saying, I'm hungry and I need to take care of myself. And I want to make sure that I have a place to sit with my friends. We end the service reminding ourselves that we are constantly in battle over those forces inside of us. And just as we want the whole world to come to know God and remove idolatry, so too within us, we want that same thing. We want to be bound by the structure of the Torah and make sure that we are living the ideal life that God wants for us. It was the famous Musar teacher, the founder of Musar, Rabbi Israel Salanter, who said, It's much easier to proclaim that God is king over the entire universe. It's much harder to proclaim that God is king over yourself. And yet that's the challenge of the Aleinu prayer. The challenge of the Aleinu is to say, what does it mean for me personally to make God sovereign in my life? How do I live with the knowledge that I am subsuming my own wishes and desires for the sake of the sovereign of the world? How do I do that on a daily basis? How do I control myself? How do I guide myself in my speech, in my dress, in my work, in my conversations with my loved ones, right? In my consumption of material? That in essence is the heart of the Aleinu, the way in which I am reading it for you today. The way I'm reading it is not the only way it can be read. But I particularly like this reading, number one, because you know that I'm constantly thinking in the lens of Musar. But number two, because the Aleinu prayer in its grand scale of theology doesn't necessarily speak to what I individually might be able to achieve in my life. If I could make God king over me and be a model for that life for others, that's the best way that the prayer is going to achieve what it is asking of us, right? To make sure that the whole world sees God as king. So let me pause for a minute and find out if anybody has any thoughts or comments based on anything I said, or are there any lines in the Aleinu prayer that you want to, ask me about that, we could take a look at in the 5 minutes that we have left, unless I've already gone over my time. Yeah, Ziggy.
So it says that V'haya Adonai Lamech. So God was. What does that mean? I mean, he always was. So why all of a sudden we say, and God was king of? I don't understand that.
Well, before humans were created, all there was God. God created the world in 6 days, and everything that God created understood as part of God's creation that God was king. Then human beings come along and immediately forget that God is king. Right? The very first thing that humans do in the Garden of Eden, when given the chance, is to go against the wishes of the God. Don't eat from the fruit of the tree of good and evil. And that's immediately what human beings do. And so the idea is that, yes, God was king, but now we think that we're king. We act in this world as if we are sovereign. Because we have so much power to have dominion in this world, because that's what God said to us in Breshit, go out and have dominion over life, we think, oh, that means that we can do whatever we want. And this prayer comes along and says, no, there are limits. Yes, you have power, but your power is subsumed under God's power, and you are guided by the rules that God has set forth for us as Jewish people, which is the Torah.
Thanks.
Any other last comment or thought? You may have noticed, yeah, Barry?
No, I find this fascinating that the rabbis put this prayer together from 3 different places and what it's doing. I mean, we read it over and over and over again, and I probably learned this a long time ago, but it's just fascinating to me about how it was constructed.
Yeah, well, I said it, I think in the very, very first class, and maybe what we can do, I just thought about this, Cantor Rafi, is maybe we'll do Matovu for one of our next prayers, because that's another prayer that is a combination of lots of different verses. And the verses tell a theological story of the rabbis choosing those verses in that order to be able to tell that story. And when we know where the sources of our prayers come from, we have a much better understanding of the theological suppositions that were in the minds of the rabbis when they created these tefillot. For the next time that we meet to talk about Aleinu, sometime in the future, we'll talk about the phrase L'taken olam b'malchut Shaddai, which many of us know as Tikkun Olam, but that's not what the rabbis intended, and that's not what the original intention of the author Rav was when he wrote L'taken olam b'malchut Shaddai. Today, Tikkun Olam is about what we do. Here, it's about something that is in the power of God. But that's for another conversation, for another Tefillah workshop. So, Cantor Rafi.
Thank you, Rabbi. That was amazing as always. And that I want to segue, Rabbi Cameras talked about acknowledging or accepting God as sovereign over ourselves and this turn inwards. And it made me think about how there's so many interpretations of prayers, and every composer who composes a melody for a prayer is interpreting that prayer in a certain way. And that's depending on how they choose the chorus. The chorus is the part that we repeat. What words do they choose to repeat? So in the first setting of Aleinu that I want to teach you all, or that I want to present to you all, and then we can learn one of them, is a melody where the composer chooses to focus on the phrase Ein Od, which Rabbi Cameras talked about. There's no other like God. And so these are the words that the composer repeats. So it's interesting to think about why this is the highlight of the prayer for this composer. So this is a composition by Craig Taubman. Many of you probably know him, whether you've met him or you've heard his music. He's the composer who's written many of the melodies that we sing at Shomer Torah, like Romemu, Romemu, Adonai Eloheinu, and Hashkivenu, Adonai Eloheinu. So he's written many standards, and this is his Aleinu. So before I play it for you, I just want to point out a couple things that are interesting about this composition. When he wrote this, he actually chose, I guess he was writing in the Reform movement, and some of you who grew up at Wilshire Boulevard Temple, there's a different text in one of the lines of the Aleinu. The Reform movement changed it to say, instead of saying we are not like other nations of the earth, change it to something like we've been bestowed with the Torah. So I think it's really interesting that we have kept the original text, and the interpretation is not to say like we are, as Rabbi Cameras was saying, not that we're above others, but that we have been chosen to maybe overcome these urges within us and accept God as sovereign. So it's not a privilege necessarily, it's a responsibility. So I changed.
Can I interrupt for 1 second?
Yeah.
In fact, that verse that was changed was actually not the original Aleinu, because there was a line in the original Aleinu that some of you may see every once in a while in an Orthodox Siddur that says, Shehem mishtachavim lehevel v'reik, for they bow down to nothingness and emptiness. And that line, which referred to pagans, the Muslims and Christians thought it referred to Jesus or Muhammad, and the Jews in the Middle Ages had to take it out for the same reason that the Reform movement changed it, because they didn't want to be seen as particularists in a prayer that was supposed to be universal in nature.
Wow, that's so interesting. Thanks, Rabbi. So I put the words back in that we use in our Lev Shalem Siddur and the conservative movement, and we'll sing together. I'm going to first sing the chorus for you, the part that's repeated, and this has a syncopated feel. And what syncopated means is that if you have a measure that goes like this, a little bit of music theory, if you have 4 beats in a measure, 1, 2, 3, 4, you can see that I'm hitting my hand on every beat like this, 1, 2, 3, 4. To be syncopated means that you're not singing on the beat. So you're going like this. Dun, 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 dun. So it has a different kind of feel. That's what syncopation is. So here we go. This is the chorus, okay? Ein od, 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 ein od. And it's like an echo. So after I say it, you say it. Here we go. Ein od,
Ein od,
ein od,
ein od,
ein od,
ein od,
ein od.
ein od.
Thank you, Kevin. And it goes like this. Aleinu לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה. אין עוד, אין עוד,
Ein od,
אין עוד,
ein od,
אין עוד.
ein od.
שלא שם חלקנו כהם וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. אין עוד,
Ein od,
אין עוד,
ein od,
אין עוד,
ein od,
אין עוד.
ein od.
And it goes on like that for a while, so you get the feel of it. Shehu note shamayim. So that's the first one. And the next one, I wanted to present something totally different. And maybe it's, you know, a little bit out of the comfort zone of tefillot that we know, because it's not exactly the text. So Craig Taubman took the text of the tefillah, but sometimes what composers do is they take a theme within the text and they expound upon it. So this is a combination of Hebrew and English. It's mostly English. I'm actually going to share the words. It's by Cantor Ellen Dreskin and Dan Nichols, who are two very well-known songwriters. They come from the Reform movement. And this is the text. Can everybody see that? So what they did is their interpretation was that it is upon us, as Rabbi Cameron was teaching, it's upon us to acknowledge and accept God as sovereign over us. And they interpret this as it's up to us to rise to the occasion, to this task of bringing about redemption and of pursuing justice and committing ourselves to action. So to repairing the world. This is their interpretation of it. So they took just one line of Hebrew from the text, Aleinu leshabeach, that's it. It's time to live our praise. And this is a prayer about praise. A lot of the text is about praising. And so they take that praise to mean, singing praise means action, doing. So that's their interpretation. Again, this is kind of out there. And I just wanted to present two very different settings of it. So this is how this one goes. It's up to us to call ourselves to task, to sing what's good and true, to bring about redemption. It's what we were free to do. For what's the point of being here if we're not moved to change our ways? Aleinu leshabeach. It's time to live our praise. We are carrying the stories of the ones who came before. What stories will be told of us when we are here no more? We commit ourselves to action. It brings meaning to our days. Aleinu leshabeach. It's time to live our praise. And the third verse is kind of like that. So these are the two. I'm going to stop the share. These are the two melodies I wanted to share with you, two very different takes. And I'd love to hear your reactions, your feedback, and then we can pick one to learn together.
The second one sounds very Christian to me.
What makes it sound Christian to you?
I don't know if I can put my finger on it, except I'm thinking of a church service on a Sunday morning with a band, and I'm just seeing all those. I don't know. It just hits me as being very Christian to me. A feeling.
I don't have that feeling. If anything, I feel the second one is more church-like.
Oh, I think that's what Barry was saying, right?
No.
Right. The second one was very church-like.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I didn't understand. Okay. Yeah, I like number one better. Is that what you said, Barry? Okay. I agree.
Any other
Everybody's so
thoughts?
quiet today.
Kevin, you like number two? You want to share your thoughts?
I thought it was beautiful, and I love the way they made a translation of it where it's different than where if you go to shul and you read it in Hebrew, it's always, talks about the Jews being the chosen one, and many Reform congregations or even conservative synagogues where there's multiple religions at community services will remove the prayer because of that, where this does not really bring that into the interpretation. So that's very nice.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a beautiful prayer, and I think it's understanding by people that are singing it. And yes, it doesn't have Hebrew in it, but it does have the translations. So when you do sing it, you know what you're saying, and you can feel the words. So I don't feel it's Christian-like. I think it's beautiful.
I also like number two better. I shouldn't say better. I've heard Greg Taubman's and I've really enjoyed it. So for me, it's fun learning something new. But the second one was talking about action. And that's something that appeals to me a lot. So I like the second one.
It's interesting because you're talking about things taken out by the Reform movement. And I did a paper in college where I actually went through the prayer book, and I went to Hebrew Union College and pulled out the minutes of the meetings in 1898 when they developed the initial prayer book, and how they debated about what they were going to put in and take out. And a lot of it was they were trying to sort of move towards a liberal Christian type movement, because at that time they were concerned about assimilation. So when you say the second one sounds Christian, that is a theme that occurred back in the turn of the century when they initially developed the Reform prayers.
Thanks, Gail. Yeah, very interesting. The Reform movement, the classical Reform music was based on the Christian Protestant tradition because, exactly as you said, Gail, instead of, the fear of losing Jews to assimilation was let's be more like our neighbors, and that way maybe we'll keep. Exactly. So that's an interesting observation, and that lends itself. I think the second one, I'm not going to share I have some things to share about the two, but it's funny. The first time I heard the second one, I really did not like it. I was like, oh, I rolled my eyes. I thought it was so cheesy. And I agree, Barry. I felt that it had this feel like, come on, let's all this, it just didn't resonate with me. But then I think the message, if we take that association out, I think the message, as Maxine was saying, it is very Jewish to do. So anyway, it's spoken to me more over the years. It was actually written only 4 years ago. So.
I'm always willing to look at different perspectives.
So I'm going to throw out, because many of us have heard the Craig Taubman Aleinu, especially at Zamru services. Why don't we learn, since nobody is being forceful, why don't we learn the second one?
Great. Okay. Thanks, Rabbi. All right, here we go. So, plus the first one is a node, a node, a node, a node. So you already learned it. Okay. So hear the words. So let's look first at the refrain or the chorus. Those two things are synonyms, by the way. The refrain or the chorus are parts of a melody that you come back to or that you repeat. So I'll just start with that part, which we sing 3 times and a 4th time to end. So. Aleinu l'shabeach. It's time to live our praise. I'll do it again. It's syncopated, remember. Aleinu l'shabeach. It's time to live our praise. I'll do it one more time. Aleinu l'shabeach. It's time to live our praise. Does somebody want to try it? Kevin, you want to go first and maybe we'll ask somebody else? Aleinu.
Sure, hold on. My dog's barking here. 1 second.
Okay.
Aleinu l'shabeach. It's time to live our praise.
Beautiful. Does anybody else want to try? Any other brave souls? I see a lot of heads shaking.
Rabbi Cameras had his hand up.
Rabbi Cameras. Yes. Okay. All right. So let's go now to the verses, which all have the same melody. So it goes like this. I know it's a little high. I actually took it down a step. It's actually written in this key. It's up to us because it's sung by Dan Nichols, so it's in a male voice and he does it an octave lower. So I took it down a little. I know it's a little still high. I'm sorry. It's up to us to call ourselves to task. Kevin, you want to try?
It's up to call ourselves to task.
To sing what's good and true.
To sing what's good and true.
To bring about redemption.
To bring about redemption.
It's what we were free to do.
It's what we were free to do.
Good. For what's the point of being here?
For what's the point of being here?
If we're not moved.
If we're not moved.
To change our ways.
To change our ways.
Aleinu l'shabeach. It's time to live our praise.
Oh, Aleinu l'shabeach. It's time to live our praise.
Good. So now I'll continue with this. I'll just sing through the 2nd and 3rd verse and everybody just try that melody. So it's kind of like, if you think of it, it's moving up and down the scale. Kind of, the notes are not very far from each other. It goes up, comes down a little bit. So just follow along with me. We are carrying the stories of the ones who came before. What stories will be told of us when we are here no more? We commit ourselves to action. It brings meaning to our days, everyone. Aleinu l'shabeach. It's time to live our praise. And the final verse goes like this. It's up to us to own the vision. We are an answer to a call. It's up to us to live the words we speak for the benefit of all. It's up to us to bow down deeply. Notice how they took Mishtachavim umodim lifnei melech. It's up to us to bow down deeply. It's up to us to bow down deeply. There's a broken world to raise. Aleinu l'shabeach. It's time to live our praise. One more time. Aleinu l'shabeach. It's time to live
That was awesome. Just beautiful. So thank you all, as usual, for coming and spending the hour with us. Hopefully inspirational, moving, and educational. Your homework for today is think about when you finish your tefillot and Aleinu, how you carry the message of Aleinu into the next hour of your day. Not your whole day, because that would be too hard, but just the next hour. So if you pray in the morning and you daven the Aleinu, find out how you carry forth that idea of being in relationship to God as sovereign. And if you do it in the afternoon, if you do it in the evening, notice what might happen, how that might change you. A reminder that on Friday at 4 o'clock, thanks to the Men's Club and Sisterhood, the synagogue is handing out Shabbat prep baskets to anybody who comes by. I'm going to be here to say hello in person to anybody who swings by. So come by and get your little Shabbat in a box, candles and challah and grape juice and all of that on Friday. And if you haven't signed up yet for our Sunday mentalist magician, do that. He is incredibly talented, and we would love to have you participate in the Zoom call. You must register in order to get the Zoom link. And we'll see you, hopefully I'll see some of you on Thursday at my Torah class, Lunch and Learn, and some of you will see Cantor Raffi on Friday at her spiritual conversation. Take care, everybody, and have a great